If you had to guess why young people today seem more anxious, more exhausted, and more terrified of failing than any generation before them, you'd probably reach for the obvious suspect. Phones. The endless scroll, the highlight reels, the comparison machine everyone carries in their pocket. At this point, it's less a theory than a reflex. Screens broke something in an entire generation. Case closed. Except, a psychologist who has spent nearly a decade studying exactly this question just published research suggesting that reflex might be aimed at the wrong target entirely. And the story of how he found that out starts with his own mind, quietly falling apart. Picture a child bursting into tears over a coloring page. Not because it looks bad, but because one line strayed 0.5 millimeter past the border. And as far as they're concerned, that single stray line has ruined the entire picture. Most adults write this off as a phase, a slightly uptight personality quirk that'll sand itself down with age. That's more or less how a young academic named Thomas Curran saw his own version of it too, right up until it nearly ended his career before it began. By his postdoctoral years in Australia, Curran had done everything a person is supposed to do. He'd climbed out of working-class roots into a genuinely promising academic career, the kind of trajectory that's meant to feel like a rival. Instead, he found himself, in his own words, crushed with anxiety, exhaustion, and panic attacks, utterly convinced the entire time that he was failing. The strange part wasn't the anxiety itself. It was what Curran believed was causing it. He was certain his perfectionism was the one thing holding him together while everything else around him collapsed. It took hitting a genuine breaking point to expose the flaw in that logic. The realization that perfectionism wasn't propping him up at all. It was the thing quietly generating the collapse. That switch in thinking didn't just bring him relief. It handed him a research question he spent the rest of his career answering. Was what happened to him a personal glitch, or something happening to an entire generation at once? His latest study just answered that question, and it's not good news. Curran had already shown, in earlier work, that perfectionism among young people had been steadily climbing through 2017. For his newest paper, published in Psychological Bulletin, he and his collaborators wanted to know whether that climb had kept going. So they pulled together data from more than 300 studies, covering over 82,000 college students across the US, UK, and Canada, stretching all the way back to 1989. Perfectionism, it turns out, isn't one trait. It's 3, layered on top of each other. There's the standard you hold yourself to, the standard you hold other people to, and a third, subtler one. The belief that everyone else is quietly demanding perfection from you, whether they've said so or not. All 3 are climbing, but not at the same speed. The third one, the sense that the world expects perfection of you, is accelerating the fastest, on a curve that bends sharply upward starting in the early 2000s. Curran didn't mince words about what that means. Perfectionism itself is a public health risk, tied directly to rising depression and anxiety. Here's the detail that should stop you in your tracks, though. That curve started bending upward years before most teenagers had a smartphone in their pocket. Which means the tidy villain everyone agreed on, the one from the very start of this video, doesn't actually fit the timeline. So if it isn't screens, Curran's team went looking for the answer somewhere far less obvious: economic data. When the researchers laid the perfectionism data next to decades of economic figures, the two lined up with unsettling precision. Falling GDP per capita predicted sharper rises in what Curran calls perfectionistic striving, the fear of failure and of other people's judgment. Rising income inequality, separately, predicted sharper rises in perfectionistic concern, the compulsion to hold yourself to standards that are, frankly, unreasonable. Translated out of research language, when the economy contracts, people get more afraid of failing. When the gap between rich and poor widens, people push themselves harder just to avoid falling into it. Curran's own biography makes the shift concrete in a way statistics alone never quite manage. He finished high school with 3 Ds on his final exams and still built a respected academic career from there. Most of his own students today need straight A's just to get in the door. Nothing about his intelligence changed between those two facts. The goalposts did. It's the same story showing up everywhere else in young adult life. Owning a home takes dramatically longer than it did for the previous generation. Stable, decades-long careers have become the exception rather than the expectation. Housing and living costs keep climbing faster than wages ever seem to. One recent survey found that roughly half of people now believe the American dream, the basic promise that hard work leads somewhere, is simply out of reach for most people who try. As the research put it, perfectionism is less a personality trait than a subconscious response to a system that keeps demanding more from anyone who wants to stay in the game. So step back from the data for a second, and the whole picture reorganizes itself. Perfectionism was never some random glitch in the wiring of an anxious generation. It looks a lot more like an adaptation, a rational, if costly, response to a world where the standards for success keep quietly moving further away. There's a harder truth buried in that reframe, and an easier one. The harder truth is that this isn't something any one person can fix alone. Deleting an app off your phone was never going to make a house in your hometown any more affordable, or make a stable career less of a relic. That's slower, collective work, and it's not finishing anytime soon. The easier truth is smaller, but it's not nothing. If the anxiety was never just internal weirdness, if it's a documented, measurable response to real economic pressure bearing down on an entire generation at once, then it stops being quite so easy to treat it as a personal failing. So think back to that kid, tears over a stray crayon line spilling 0.5 millimeter past the border. Maybe the mistake was never the line. Maybe it was ever believing there was something wrong with a mind for caring that much. In a world that keeps quietly raising what enough is supposed to mean.